You're listening to the Marne Report.
Hi, Fort Stewart and Hunter Army Airfield. Kelsey here, back with another edition of the Marne Report podcast. Today, I'm joined by James Dean from the Directorate of Plans, Training, Mobilization, and Brett Cohen from the Directorate of Public Works. Today, we're going to talk all about next year's Black Start exercise and how the installation is preparing for it now. Thank you guys so much for being with me. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Good.
Well, before we get into everything, do you guys want to introduce yourselves and tell people a little bit more about your roles here on Fort Stewart and Hunter Army Airfield?
I'm James Dean. I work at DPTMS Plans. I'm a contingency planner, emergency contingency planner.
And I am Brett Cohen. I am the chief of the Energy and Utilities branch at DPW, OMD. And then I'm also the energy manager for the installation.
So you're very critical in turning people's power off.
Well, that's just one facet. More about getting on people about shutting off lights, shutting off faucets, not wasting energy.
There you go. For those that don't know, what exactly is the Black Start exercise?
Well, the Black Start exercise is a resiliency exercise to test our ability to do our core functions when we're not hooked up to the external grid, to make sure our backup generators are working properly, our ups that underneath your desk are working properly, and we have enough backup power to do our mission.
Anything to add?
Well, I would like to clarify it's safe to say, everyone who works at Fort Stewart has a mission, right? Wherever they work, they have a job to do. Mm-hmm. And if you ask them, they'll believe that, what they do is critical. But we do have to consider that when it's a Black Start exercise, it's not any individual agency's critical mission, is what is the installation's mission. And so you may not fall under that, critical component, that is required to keep running even if the power goes on. So just putting that out there, because it's
you're gonna hurt people's feelings.
Right. It's kind of like the line in The Incredibles, right? If everyone is special, no one is. Yeah. Same thing here is like if everyone thinks they're a priority, then no one's a priority.
What are some of those more like critical things that we have to keep running?
Well, not to get into specifics because, kind of don't want to advertise that, but kind of like the chief things like communications, hospital, access to arms, the hospital.
Health and safety.
Yes, stuff like that.
Okay.
Fuel points, so.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the important things, to get basically equipment or transport equipment off the base and then transport personnel off the base if needed.
Our main mission is power projection.
Correct.
So as long as we continue that mission, that's the critical aspect. And life, health, safety, like you said.
Right.
And why is it important to do the Black Start exercise?
Well, one, it's mandated by the Department of the Army for every installation to do it every 5 years. That's number one. Mainly because we have to be able to test our generators and test our equipment under a load. Brett's team goes out there, inspects those generators, pulls maintenance on those generators all the time. They work. You asked him, he'll tell you they work. But he'll also tell you, you put a load on that generator over an extended time period, that's totally different than what they're testing when they do it maintenance. So that's what we're doing. We're putting a load, put some stress on them to see if they're going to continue to function.
I will clarify that there is load that gets put on a generator, but there are things that can happen that can cut off power to a building, like the transfer switch that you can kind of think about as a power switch that switches a building being powered from the generator versus the grid, right? Sometimes that switch could get hung up in the middle, meaning that it's not getting fed by anything, and so there are maintenance issues like that can happen that can prevent a generator or like a facility from getting powered. This type of exercise is to help us try to identify where those deficiencies are in supplying power and by extension, other amenities like potable water, wastewater to those critical facilities when we need it. Because we don't know when strife happens in the world and Fort Stewart is called upon, and the person and Third ID is called upon to deploy. And so we need to be able to do that regardless of what the conditions are here locally. So whether it's like today, bright, sunny, really hot, and we do have power, or it's after a hurricane and, the whole base is wiped out from power, we still need to be able to do that job regardless.
Yeah, understandable. So what is Fort Stewart and Hunter Army Airfield doing now to prepare for Black Start?
We're doing monthly exercises. The Black Start exercise could last up to 8 hours. We're not going to take them 8 hours every month. So about 90 minutes, we're going to test one circuit on Hunter and one circuit on Fort Stewart to make sure that we're getting ready for the exercise. It's not only the generators, it's the people in those buildings too. If you live in a housing area, your power goes off in the housing area, don't open the refrigerator. Keep it cool in there. Teach your children not to open the refrigerator. Teach your children where the flashlights are. It's a great opportunity. Same thing in our barracks. We have checklists. PAO, you're publishing those QR codes for our facility managers to use their phone, pull up the checklist, whether they have a generator or they don't have a generator, and let us know what happened during the power outage. What are the lessons learned in your barracks, or in your building, in your house? So we can get everything together, and we may have to go out and give classes on what you have to do for a power outage. We don't know that yet. We don't know what we don't know. But we're getting good input. Good example, we did our first one last month, Circuit 1. We had a generator at one of the gates, I'm not going to name no installation or gate, that was just pulled maintenance on, like a week before. Worked great. Great generator. Started working during the power outage. Then it shut off. The biggest concern with the gate guards was I lost my internet. Not that the power was out, but I lost my internet. They didn't realize that internet is relying on the power.
Yeah.
So you have to start putting the dominoes together to figure out, if I lose power, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah.
To me, in a dining facility, does it mean I have to stop cooking? Or am I relying on gas and I don't have to stop cooking? So, there's a lot of things that are going to come out of these exercises that has nothing to do with the power. Just operator headspace and time, about how we react during these exercises.
I like that.
Right, and I always think that, while we on our side are really kind of testing, or at least looking at or prioritizing the critical functions and making sure that they're maintained, everyone can at least look at like what their continuing operation plan is, right? And see if there's any gaps in that. Kind of going off of what JD had said, there are things that you notice not, until the power is out.
Yeah.
Like, for example, my building has a generator, and during the weekly tests of that generator, our internet would always kick out, right when the generator come on. And so upon further investigation, we figured out that the backup battery system for our server was just bad, right? And so even though the power, it was just flashing, that was enough to just basically shut off the server and make it reset. And so we were out of internet, service for like 15 minutes. But the easy fix was just getting a new, battery backup system, hooking that up, and then problem solved. So it can be as small as that, it could be as bad as, a generator not starting or not staying on. So we kind of look for it all.
So it's a good way for the community as a whole to see. And as you said, I liked your idea of bringing in like families, being like, how would you prepare if the power went out? And even like in the defects and things like that, you don't think of all those small entities of everyone doing their job when the power would go out. So when are these exercises and what can people expect? I know we hit on that a little, but...
The monthly exercises are the last Thursday of every month. The circuits, they're going to vary. The times will vary. And reason that they're varying because we're trying not to impact the community as bad as we have. Like this month, we're doing it at 09 in the morning on the 29th of May. The reason we did it on the 29th of May at 9 o'clock, so it wouldn't be too hot in the CDCs. If we did it in the afternoon, no air conditioning, children would be very hot. So we did it early in the morning to lessen the impact on the children. So we will do that every month, figure out which circuit we have to test, what are the impacts that we think is going to happen, and how can we mitigate that as much as possible to make it doable. are comfortable for the attendants here on the installation.
Gotcha. Anything to add?
No, I mean, just more like a personal preference. Like, I don't necessarily like as much of the advertisement of the exercise as some people do, just because I kind of look at it from a different angle, which is things like a hurricane, for example.
You never know.
You know when a hurricane is coming, you can at least plan around that. But there are things like a tornado or
just a really bad
like
storm,
things that just happen suddenly that can knock out power. And so trying to get an exercise that's as close to that as possible is my ideal, but
and letting people know when the power goes out is not within
not
those
exactly.
parameters.
But,
yeah.
I understand, trying to, mitigate the detrimental effects, and the disruption. So
we're taking baby
steps.
Exactly. Which is going to segue into my next bit. Yeah. So I know we've already had one, and obviously being public affairs, there was a little bit of backlash on our social media about the exercise. So some of the things that I thought we could address is one person was like, why can't you do this at 2 or 3 a.m.?
Well, for one thing, no one's in the office at 2 or 3 in the morning. So, even though that previous exercise affected Circuit 1, which is mostly housing, there were still some, important buildings on that circuit that we needed feedback from. And so we can't, unless they're going to authorize, overtime for people to come in, during 2 or 3 in the morning to collect data for us, we can't really run it at that period. And I also know that, and this was purely by coincidence, but at the same time that exercise happened, there was, I think, a contractor that ended up hitting a line near a transformer, and it shut off a couple homes, independently from, the exercise. So I understand some of the confusion came from that.
Another one is, why are we doing this in the hot months?
Well, we're going to be doing it all. And there's not very many cold months down south.
That is very true. You're on Fort Stewart. And then someone said, is this just a way for us to save money on electricity?
No, that's not the case.
I mean, it could, depending on when we shut it off, but, it may only save us a couple $1,000s here and there. No, unfortunately.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to tell the people of Fort Stewart and Hunter Army Airfield, or how to prepare themselves going forward?
Probably just to kind of pay attention to PAO's website, and I think social media is where
readyarmy.gov
right
is a great source. FEMA website is a great source for power outage, emergency management, checklist, things that you need to do to prepare for these type of conditions.
Right, and then just more locally, PAO is always, you guys are always putting out these announcements on all the social media sites. I don't know if they make it to the Marne message.
They do.
Kind of
we notify housing, My Army Post app.
How many people see the Marne message, but as long as people are at least paying attention to at least one of those avenues, they should be pretty well read into what exercise is coming up.
Awesome. Anything else you guys want to add?
No, I think that was it.
Awesome.
Give us feedback.
Yeah.
Call PAO with all your problems.
Oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that. All right, now I know I learned a lot, and I hope our audience did too. To stay up to date on Fort Stewart Hunter Army Airfield activities, please follow us on social media and download the My Army Post app. Thank you all so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. I'm Kelsey Stieber, and that concludes this episode of the Marne Report. See you next week.
The My Army Post app is your one-stop source for all things Fort Stewart Hunter Army Airfield. With map at your fingertips, you'll never miss out on upcoming events, installation updates, facility and gate information, weather, shopping, and so much more. My Army Post is free from your phone's app store. Download today.